Look, it looks like we've got folks trickling in. RP, I know we've only got 30 minutes, so why don't we go ahead and dive in? First off, appreciate you doing this. Would love for you to kind of share your background with the group here, and then we'll dive into some of the content that you've got as we think about making AI and data more accessible for the GTM seed. And yeah, I'll let you kind of take it away. If folks have any questions, feel free to add it to the Q&A here. We're going to try to make this conversational here as we get going. But yeah, thanks again, RP. Really excited for this.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you for having me here. Just a quick, who am I? I've been working in the GTM space mostly my whole career for the last 13 years. I always say my major is data and analytics, and then my minor is all things GTM business strategy. Throughout my career, I've worked both in industry, like places like Stack Overflow, Eventbrite, and I've also worked at pretty much all the big fours. I'm a big runner, so I recently ran the New York City Marathon, and then my favorite food is smash burgers. So recently moved to Philadelphia, so trying to find a new place to get a good smash burger. But yeah, that's all about me.
I love it. RP, I know you've got a lot to cover, but really quick, I feel like when most people think of Big Four, I don't know if data and analytics is the first thing that they think about. They think maybe tax or audit first. Like, maybe tell us a little bit more about what happened. Like, how does the Big Four think about like this piece? Kind of what's your role there?
Yeah, so I work at EY and I'm part of a team called PE Value Creation. So really what we do is help so whenever a PE firm is buying and selling a company, we help them understand what's going or not. So we grab all their billings data, bookings data, any type of revenue data and munch through it and look for, okay, well, how's their are looking, what are the upsells, downsells, cross sells, what's driving the churn? And then once we understand that, we double click and look in, okay, downsell is going down. That could be related to customers buying less seats because they're not hiring as many people because of AI is taking a lot of the roles. So just double clicking and just trying to understand what is the true equity story of a business and then advising on how to derive more value out of that business. So in the past, I know Josh, you were at William Blair and back in the day, I've worked with those folks a lot. And yeah, that's a lot of what we do in Big Four. A lot of Big Fours have teams like this that do this. And then they have pure AI and analytics folks that actually help build the metrics out, implement AI and all of that. So yeah, beyond just tax and audit.
Yeah, for what it's worth, I think a little bit more interesting for me personally, at least, than either of those two. So, all right, I'll let you take us away here. I know we've got a lot of ground to cover.
Yep. No worries. So the state of GTM and RevOps in general, I like to split the two because I think people think of them in two different ways. But overall, this has been going on since I started in the GTM space. Data is always messy and fragmented. Process is inconsistent depending on if you talk to sales, marketing, customer success, product. Metrics are misaligned. So product might be defining NRR differently than sales is and so on. So that could drive a lot of confusion. And then tech stack, tons of tech, not driving value. So how do you make sure that you're using it as best as you can? And going through like my framework and understanding how to use data and AI and analytics to rev up the GTM, the first thing I really want to talk through, and it's the cheat code between consultants, is first principles. I know a lot of people talk about it now, but really it's just breaking things up into smallest pieces possible and then working backwards. So AR is down. Why is it down? Break that down as much as you can and really get to the true issue of what's driving AR issues. Always think in first principles. And then the next thing that you should always think about, and this is another consulting term, but just value creation. PE firms always think about value creation. They buy a company and they want to flip it in the next 5 to 10 years. So you got to do some type of value creation. But if you don't work in the PE space, even VC space, or for a public company, at the end of the day, any strategy you implement in your RevOps or GTM, it has to connect back to growth or productivity. So growth, ARR, revenue, productivity, units economics, margins, and those are the two things you always have to connect the dots back to. So before you do anything, just remember that when you're trying to convince finance, sales, always think at growth or productivity as your hook and why you want to do something.
I'd be curious. I think one thing that we've seen shift, at least over the past 5 years, it feels maybe call it 2022, productivity, profitability started to become a much bigger theme, I think, thematically within a lot of startups. Are you starting to see folks shift back more towards focusing on growth at this point? Is it kind of a 50-50 split, you'd say, of like where folks are spending time, or are we still in the world of efficiency over growth at this point for kind of a lot of folks?
Yeah, I think since COVID, things got a little confusing because it was growth at all costs, then back to productivity. And now what I'm seeing more with the work I'm doing is that they're looking for a balance of both. So a lot of the work before a lot of the work I was doing is let's just look at AR only and then some of the pipeline metrics. But now it's more about, okay, let's also look at the units economics. What is like CAC payback? What does LTV to CAC look like? And now with AI coming along, they also want to look at usage information. What is the adoption rate of in a lot of these businesses? So that I would say the adoption stuff goes more on the growth side, but yeah,
It's
I'm
super
seeing.
helpful. I'm curious, and maybe you'll touch on it with the AI piece, but I think one thing that's come up more and more frequently has been now we're starting to see a focus more on gross profit, where SaaS historically, you didn't really need to focus on it because the margin profile was so high. With
Yeah.
AI comes a very different margin profile. Are you starting to see more of the businesses really double click into at the even kind of gross profit level what margins are? Or is it still just top line and then EBITDA and everything else in between is maybe not quite as critical, depending on the stage of company, obviously?
I would say more recently, I'm seeing organizations go more deeper into that aspect and trying to get at the more customer level. So are there specific customers that are driving a poor margin profile, but they're growing? But like, how do you balance both of them? You might have to fire that customer because they're taking in too much of your compute resources. So
That's such
folks
an
are starting to
interesting
look at that a little
shift.
bit more. Yeah.
Yeah, it's such an interesting shift where like you actually now have power users that can actually be driving net negative profitability, where historically I think you'd always be wanting folks to use more and more. So super interesting. All right, I'll let you keep going here.
No worries. So when we thinking about how do we embed data, AI, even any other things outside of that process improvement, the way I think about it, my framework is first like defining what the problem is, and then splitting up into small parts. So that's like the first principle aspect of it. Analyze each part to figure out, okay, what is actually driving that problem, build the insights, the story, and then find your hook from what I was referring earlier. Is it a growth or productivity story that you're trying to build? And then go execute on that initiative. So if you're trying to bring in AI SDRs, what does that actually mean to productivity or to growth? It could have either or story. So as you build out, what are like the small pieces that build out your GTM? This is just something high level. It might look a little different on your end. You might do it a little bit differently, but definitely map out what your customer journey or your GTM value chain looks like. And that's like the first step. You should always have this. You should know what it is for your business. If you don't, this is probably the first thing you should do to figure out, okay, what does it look like in your business from generating pipeline to all the way to renewing and having repeat customers. The next thing, once you have that mapped out, and this is not, this slide was not built by me. It was from Insight Partners, and I really liked it. So I took it and made a little bit of it my own, but it was done really well. And I think the key thing here is you need to understand what is the goal of each value chain or each stage of the customer journey from pipeline generation. It could be, we have to penetrate the market, we have to generate demand. And on the sell side, we need to target the right customers, have the right ICP, get response and engagement, and making sure we can close them quickly and throughout the whole life cycle of a customer. So really think through what is the purpose of each stage of the customer journey and part of the GTM. After you have that mapped out, you need to really understand what are the key metrics that really tell you how that stage is doing throughout. So I would make sure not, I've been in organizations where they had 100 metrics. If you have 100 metrics, you're not really measuring anything at all. You're just causing a lot of confusion. So the way I like to do it is having my North Star metrics, another consulting term that I probably hate saying, but I use it a lot. But these are like your lagging metrics that you're graded against your board, your investors, your C-suite, and that could be AR and margins, maybe the two things. And under that could be what are the components of AR, upsell, downsell, cross sell, NRR, GR, churn percentage. But there's a set of metrics under that are like what is happening in the business day-to-day activity metrics. And this is where this comes in. And these are the places where you actually have levers to pull every day to improve the GTM. If you don't have this, I would say this is the first place we should go and get on and build. Because without this, you can't do anything else. Build a proper strategy, can't bring in the right tech, can't bring in the right AI. It's just going to become really messy. But I'll just hold right here because I think I said a lot already. If there's any questions or anything.
Yeah, no, this is super helpful. We've got some questions coming in. I think going back to the last slide, actually, there's clearly a lot on it. I think RevOps teams are responsible for many of these things, if not most. As you think about where should someone start, they're dropped into a new role. Are there areas in here that you'd start every kind of engagement with where you're focusing on, we should do this first? Like, how do you maybe think about the prioritization of all of these things for what are traditionally kind of lean teams?
Yeah, so I might be a little biased, but I always like looking at current customers, so all the way to the far right, and looking in how can we reduce churn? Because a lot of times when I'm on deals, that's the first thing that a PE investor might look at. And they want to make sure you have a strong customer base that you could grow from. So anything you could do around understanding what does your current customer base look like, who are your strongest segments, how can you make sure that you could decrease customer health, like increase customer health, but stay away from the customers that aren't doing well. So I think overall, looking at ways to keeping your customer base strong and that you could grow from over time.
One thing you mentioned is segmenting, and this comes up in a lot of the conversations we have. What's the right level of segmentation that you're doing, or is there kind of like common segments that you're doing every time? Is it splitting it by employee size or industry that you're continually coming back to, or is it really kind of like bespoke and custom for every kind of engagement that you're working on?
So typically you would want the basics of revenue, each customer by account size. So how much are they spending with you? How large is that business? What vertical are they in? Are they in hospitality, retail, and so on? But you also, that we don't often get it, but you can enrich it through products like Clay or there are other competitors getting information on their technographics. Because I think that's really helpful of understanding, okay, of the customer base that are seeing strong NRR, do they have a certain specific tech stack that our product works well with? And that's maybe have a feedback loop back to marketing and new sales that you can leverage. So I think that's where like the more bespoke part of it happens and understanding what's happening. And then I would say often at times I'm working with a lot of businesses that are selling software to like retail. So also knowing where they are, what are like the demographics of the area they're living in for that retail software. If it's say like a Burger King and you're selling like a POS system to them, do they have the right demographic there? And like where are there other retailers that have similar demographics that you haven't penetrated? So sometimes like geospatial information might be helpful depending on the type of company you are.
It's super helpful. Maybe going to 9. So there's a ton of great metrics on here, and I love the idea of getting to all of them. I think one of the pain points and one of the questions that we really commonly get here is how do we approach building these metrics if our data isn't perfect? How do you think about coming up with the right calcs here, finding the balance maybe between like data quality while still getting to something in the nearer term where some of this might be a little bit messier than I think everyone in ops would like?
Yeah, so if your data is messy, I think the way I would approach it to prioritize which metrics to build is that through, say, through the sales cycle, the three metrics that I always have that you could track, and I would do it at a cohort level. So what I mean by that, when a new pipeline is qualified. So that's like the moment that it becomes like a specific cohort. And from there, you want to look at conversion metrics throughout the stages, the size of that deal, and then also the time it's staying in the stage. And you could do a lot with that as you're hacking your GTM. So at a moment where you notice, oh, demo conversion rates are going down, you could look at the other two metrics, understand, oh, they're just taking much longer. Why are they taking much longer? And then you can do some interviews with folks that are doing demos to narrow in what the issue is and then go solve for it. And you might not need other metrics. I think those three metrics help a lot with understanding what's happening.
I love the idea of prioritizing some of the key metrics here first. I think this can really quickly turn into the boil the ocean exercise. But I love getting to just a couple that make sense. I know we've got a couple more slides to cover, but one area that's come up has been around, are you seeing anything from AI that is helping you get to these metrics faster or helping improve the quality that maybe didn't exist pre-2023, call it?
Yeah, I would say the one area I'm seeing AI benefiting with data is that we're able to clean the data quicker and faster than before. I think a lot of times it took a lot of hands-on keyboard work, trying to figure out how to clean it up. And I would say Claude is like the one like tool that a lot of folks are using, including myself, to write code for you to fix what's wrong with the data. Say if you're working with AR data and you have a lot of AR gaps, instead of trying to figure out the right way to build the logic, Claude could do it for you and you could get the insights quicker. And then when you're doing insight building, I oftentimes use AI. I plug in like a spreadsheet or like just the data or take a screenshot of it. And it helps me ideate or figure out what the story is happening in the business. So I think that's like a good way to leverage it right now. If you do happen to see like a data issue happening more often and often, I think that's where you could use AI to augment that work instead of doing it over and over again. It can also help you do alerts when anything looks a little bit odd, having some of those agents embedded in your organization.
Makes a ton of sense. We got another question that came in is, what are you seeing the top performing GTM looks like versus call it an average GTM team? Is there something that's separating out the 1% of those top performers?
So this might be like a bias, but I think I always like it when the admin or tech side of the RevOps or GTM team is like one pillar, and then you have a pillar of folks that are like more strategy analytics folks, and they're working in partnership with one another. Because I think oftentimes it's hard to find people that are good at both, which I find the market is hiring for a unicorn typically to do all of that. But if you have a team of doing both, I think that's where I see GTM teams being the most successful. I think I had that opportunity when I was at Stack Overflow. I led the BI and strategy side of it. And then I had one of my peers who owned like the Salesforce and the tech stack. And him and I just worked and tackled problems one by one. And it also helped that we were both like really good friends. So it just helped to just make things happen.
It makes total sense. And for what it's worth, I think I've experienced the same thing. I will say being friends with your counterpart on their side definitely makes it a lot better. No, this is great. I know you got a couple more slides. Anything else that you want to cover here, RP?
Nope, I think this is the foundation. So really think through what are like the right metrics. Don't boil the ocean like Josh was saying. Just build a few metrics that really tell the story of what's happening through each stage.
Got it. RP, this has been so informative, so helpful. We love to keep these kind of like quick, fast paced, and really appreciate the time. We got a comment saying, we're so lucky to get to listen to you for 30 minutes without paying your EY rates. We couldn't be more appreciative. I'll let you guess who sent that one in. But RP, if folks want to stay in touch with you, ask questions on any of this, or trying to stand some of this stuff up themselves, where can they kind of find you? What's the best place?
Find me on LinkedIn, just ping me. We could get on a call and go from there. Let me know.
Amazing. RP, really cannot thank you enough for this. It's been such a pleasure to get to know you and appreciate you taking the time out of the day to do this. Really appreciate it. We'll be sharing the recording of this with everyone that has attended. Thank you all for joining. And yeah, follow RP on LinkedIn, just putting out some of the best content that's out there. But thank you so much again.
Yep, no worries.
All right, take care, y'all.